Welcome everybody who's come along to the webinar. If you've joined us in the past, then it's great to have you back. And if it's your first time, welcome to this webinar. It's the fourth one in the series of the Future of Performing Arts webinar series by Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts. I host this webinar along with my colleague, Louise Lee. And we'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So as we're going through the session, feel free to place questions that you have in the chat box, and we'll attempt to cover them during our discussion. So in the last three webinars, we've talked about teaching and learning and the impact that COVID's had on performing arts teaching and learning, and particularly around how the innovations that have been made over the last 6 months or so can be consolidated and how we can learn from those. But simultaneously, we've had huge changes happening in the arts. Arts have been changing a lot, probably over the last 10 years or so, in terms of the integration of technology. And if we look at areas like gaming, they've really been the growth sector in terms of arts and culture. And COVID, the last 6 months of COVID-19 has really sped up this change. And we've seen multiple areas of develop and adapt to the changing situation. Things such as our actual definition of arts and culture is shifting. What's the role, place, and meaning of the arts? What's their place in contemporary society? All of these things are changing. So whilst this webinar is not specifically about education, we're going to look at the ways that the arts are changing, and that's going to have significance for us in terms of how we should teach and what we should teach in the future, and what the landscape is that our students are going to emerge into.
And today we have three speakers joining us. Will be David Kwok, Artistic Director from Bell Cantle Singers, and he's also an alumni of the Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts. We also have Sarah Ellis, Director of Digital Development from the Royal Shakespeare Company from the UK. And with us also we have Helen So, Policy Researcher at the Public Policy Institute of our Hong Kong Foundation, the largest public policy think tank in Hong Kong. And in terms of the structure of this webinar, our speakers will start with a brief introduction on the topic of how performing arts is changing and where it is heading. And following the discussion, the speakers will take questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please post it on the chat. And without further delay, I'm just going to pass the mic to David Kwok. David?
Hi, everyone. I'm David Kwok. I'm actually an alumni from the I'm a vocal major from the academy last century, and over the last 20 years, I've been involved in the opera world here in Hong Kong, and gradually moving into spread out more into concerts and even musical theater. And for the last 6 months, I found that firstly the theater is closed. All the theaters are closed, and we are gradually reopening. But in terms of audience size and all that, it's not enough to make ends meet in Hong Kong. And even though in Hong Kong we're lucky to have huge support from the Hong Kong government, like the Leisure and Cultural Department or the Arts Development Council, but then So a lot of us are actually heading towards the YouTube and Facebook and all the online thing that we can do. And I myself, in particular, with our shows, I didn't dare to take the risk of opening up our shows to audience, because firstly, we only allowed half the size of the theater, and that doesn't work, because in terms of making ends meet or balancing the bill, it doesn't work from my side. So I'm still in looking for ways of generating incomes for our group, and apart from our sponsors or from the government. And well, I guess this is how we start. I mean, diving into the new world of online, because before this, all our videos and all our stuff are only for archival purpose, or we chop it up into little pieces and put it online. And that is for sharing purpose and not so much for doing shows online. But for our last 3 shows, one to be streamed next week, we already had 2 shows online. One of them called the musical that I wrote called The Happy Prince, which was very well received in a way. And the other one, a pop version of all the Mozart's opera, that was with the help of the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And that, unfortunately, we did 4 days, and then we have to take it off. And I'm waiting for Jockey Club the festival of the Jockey Club to be over before I can put it online again. And currently, the show we just recorded last week, it's about all Puccini's music, and that I'm in the process of editing and mixing and getting the video ready, and we're going to stream it this Friday. So that's about it. I mean, from my side.
Great, thank you, David. So we have an example here of an artist who's moving their practice online, which is fantastic. So thank you for that description. I'm going to move on to our second speaker, Sarah Ellis, who's Director of Digital Development at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And obviously, I guess quite a lot of your work's been shifting online over this period, Sarah.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me today. It's really brilliant to be here, and I loved your introduction. Just want to say the provocation about what landscape are we going into is such a live question for us all right now in whatever aspect of performing arts we work in. And to say that we in theatre have always had a relationship with technology, and I'd say over the last 10 years have been looking at a form of disruption of technology within performance, and those new tools and technologies coming into live performance has been growing and emerging. And we've been looking at the stage here behind us as our home, but also the multiple stages that we can be on over the last, I'd say particularly 10 years. What the pandemic has caused is a form of accelerated disruption now, where we have certain stages not available to us in the same way, or certain ways of making that are not available to us in the same way. So our relationship with technology has shifted somewhat in over the past 6 months, and actually technology is now about access and equity, collaboration. Where are our audiences? Looking at home as a destination for performance now more than ever, looking at new ways that we can make our work. So at the RSC, what we're looking at is not only at the streaming aspect, but how do we make our work? Virtual production tools, working in games engines, working in with new technologies, not just at the end of distribution, but in content creation, also co-creation. I think we have to also ask our audiences a lot more about how they're feeling and what they're about. And to give you an example, we were due to perform A Midsummer Night's Dream in June using immersive technology, virtual reality, augmented reality, and distributing that out. That wasn't possible, but we're pivoting that. And the first thing that we did was did a huge audience research survey to find out what our audiences wanted and needed. And it was overwhelming when they came back to us and said, we want to feel together, we want liveness, and also the inequity around technology. Assuming people that have the same amount of technology in their homes is not the case. And so we must make work that is as easily accessible as it is cutting edge. And that's a really important beat that we have to have at the moment, I think, in this accelerated disruption phase, which is that we keep our mainstream audiences together and bring that emergent thought and expertise in the right way, so that we create something that builds and doesn't polarize and doesn't make someone feel that they can't access it because they don't have the best form of technology in their hands. We know that the actor is the best form of storytelling technology there is. We know that when we collaborate, we can open ourselves up to new ways of making things. We know that the consumption and creation of art is changing. We know we're learning. We are experimenting live. We are looking at new models in the short term that we hope for the longer term will commercialize. But it's really important to note that what artists do brilliantly is make. And what we've seen over the past few months is a wealth of experimentation, risk, innovation. And when you put technology in the hands of artists, that's what happens. And I think that we're really seeing that right now and should take hope from that. And what the promise of theatre can be going forward is very much in relation to the imagination and ingenuity of those artists having access to technology. And I think that's, as much as it is an overwhelming, disruptive time, that is something that we have to hold on to right now.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. I think we'll come back to some of the ideas in our discussion period. But right now, I'm just going to pass the mic to Helen. Again, Helen is a policy researcher, and she recently co-authored a paper on the Hong Kong's first policy recommendation paper on the arts technology convergence. So I think she'll tell us more about that. And in the meantime, for our attendees, for our audience today, if you have any questions, do post them on the chat, and we will bring your questions to the speakers after. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Louise. So I am Helen, and I'm a policy researcher at our Hong Kong Foundation, a local think tank, obviously, and my focus is in arts innovation. So I look at kind of arts and cultural policy, and David and Sarah before me, they've given very brilliant, angles from a practitioner side. And so perhaps I'll enter this discussion talking a little bit about policy. And because I'm talking about a piece of research, I've prepared kind of 8 slides. So just bear with me, 8 slides on kind of a bit of our research. And as I'm just going to make sure you guys can see this. Are we all good? Okay, wait, I'm just going to click on the slideshow. Yeah, okay. So like Louise had mentioned, so our team actually recently launched a new report in June entitled Innovating Creative Cultures, Arts Tech, and it's the first of its kind in Hong Kong to delve into like the ongoing trend of arts and tech convergence. So although arts tech seems to be like, the thing these days, we actually decided to embark on this quite a while ago, way before COVID, way before. Because as a policy researcher, I would, of course, try and stay up to date with the cultural happenings or kind of cultural developments in other jurisdictions. And I realized that economies such as the UK, South Korea, and Taiwan, they had all, developed strategic blueprints and other plans to develop arts tech specifically already. So it's already like very much on the policy agenda for them. And so I saw arts tech as an imminent trend and that Hong Kong ought to study it, right? And actually, before we know it, COVID had already accelerated the digitalization of arts and culture and had made arts tech, the very relevant subject that it is today. So very quickly, a few reasons why arts tech is worth our while. Obviously because arts tech gives new possibilities to artists. Tech has revolutionized arts in many aspects, and immersive VR, for example, just now Sarah mentioned, it adds a new dimension of interactivity, so rendering new ways of engaging with audiences. And tech has also reduced boundaries between the traditions of each art form. So, theatre now blends with film, computer programming merges with sculpture, ballet with fashion, gaming headsets are starting to enter into, opera spheres, for example. So carving out new audiences and new possibilities. And equally important, I think we all need to remember that arts can also unleash, the creative potential of technology. So not only does tech help art, but art actually also helps technology. So the immersive and experiential nature of art can also facilitate the effective communication of technology. So making it more accessible and closer to the masses. So here you see is an art installation at CERN Center in Geneva, actually, to better visualize data through creative ways. So which is why the relationship between arts and technology is very complementary. Arts need technology for it to remain relevant and competitive in the same way that tech needs arts for more imaginative communication of ideas. So the two very much inspire each other and each offers more dynamism to the other discipline. Okay, so all this only reifies the prevalence of arts tech and how imminent it is. Okay, so we can also have, because I do policy research, so we must also have a look at the figures. All this shows actually is that arts tech can also help the creative and cultural industries too when we look at statistics. So here on the left, you will see that the interactive media, software, and computer game sector, we will call it the IMSCG, so the pink sector, actually contributes the largest proportion to both you know, CCI's total value add, which is 45%, and total employment, which is 28% in 2017. And looking at the right, this compares the cumulative growth rate of CCI and IMFCG to GDP. But okay, so the pink line basically shows the interactive media sector, and the grey line, the grey dotted line, shows the creative cultural industries. All you need to know is that the IMFCG sector is the main driving force behind the creative culture industry's value increase. So in other words, there would not have been an increase in CCI's value add without the contribution of the interactive media sector. So again, reinforcing there is much potential for arts tech if talents across the industry is leveraged. Okay, so far for the past, 5 slides, we've covered how arts tech helps artists, technologists, industry, right? And there's also one more reason why arts tech warrants study in Hong Kong, and this is the reason policymakers particularly care about. We think in order for arts tech to kickstart in Hong Kong, we need support in 4 main policy arenas. You see blueprint, funding, infrastructure, and networks, okay? And we have made recommendations based on these 4 umbrella areas. First, we think it's a must to devise some sort of a plan for arts tech on a policy level that brings cultural and technology sectors to work together. So this blueprint will cover, policies for funding, and a short-term recommendation is to open up kind of the project scopes of existing funding schemes in the government. And then obviously a longer-term recommendation would be to call for a new funding that specifically supports arts tech projects. Now, infrastructure means, having space and venue for arts tech experiments. And our recommendation here is to strengthen existing arts tech infrastructures at Hong Kong's universities, perhaps including the Hong Kong APA, and to allocate testing spaces in West Kowloon, for example, or existing cultural institutions. Last but not least, we find that there is a big information gap between art circles and technology circles. So some sort of kind of a digital culture platform would be necessary to create a network of expertise and sharing of best practices. The UK has a digital culture network with quite a noble aim, and South Korea has one with quite a comprehensive linkage from academia through to industry, into schools and government agents as well. So yes, I'm very wary of time. So these are the main, sort of the 5 main recommendations of our report. And I've just taken you through why arts tech is worthwhile and how policy should facilitate it. So this is all from me for now, and I'm happy to, chat about this more later. Thank you.
Great. Fantastic overview from everybody. So thank you for that. I'm going to try to start off with something that's very solid for us to come from. We've had 2 questions thinking about audience over this period and different versions of it. And it picks up on things particularly that Sarah and David talked about. So Brian Watkins has asked about the pandemic and live streaming of video, and has said that's something that a lot of people are doing at the moment. But what are the problems that causes? I know, Sarah, you picked up on some of those issues around accessibility, and David, you talked about some of those issues as well. And then we've got another question from Jean-Guy Leca, and he said theatre could exist without an audience. So he's posed that as a question. So could theatre exist without audience? And then he's asking a question about acting and whether actually actors, and I guess even the notion of performance, requires that audience interaction. And is something vital missing from live performance when we're actually streaming? So I think these questions come together. I don't know if anybody has an immediate responses to these.
I've got a few. I mean, I can get us going if that's
brilliant.
That's
Thank
helpful.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I think live streaming is really interesting because it's all about perception, and it's also about sort of going, live streaming is a different form of theatre, not a replacement of. So you now have to look at it in terms of choice and pathways in, and kind of we need to sort of recalibrate what live streaming is for a theatrical audience and make sure that audience and the performer and their work is not sort of despite of, so it's not because you can't, and we make it the best form of experience possible to our audiences. So the issues around live streaming are that it's not a simple sort of here's our live performance for people in real life and then here's your stream. We've got to think about both, and we've got to architect it. So for example, in our Live from Stratford and Avon live froms that we were doing pre-pandemic, a huge amount of care and attention went into the adaptation aspect of it. We changed the lighting ratios in the theatre to make it work for film and not in the theatre necessarily. And it's those nuances and that detail that we have to continue in the live streaming debate. What we have to acknowledge right now is that the purpose of live streaming is to get our work out, and it's to keep us going. But that's a short-term goal. And as we go through our medium and long-term goals, we know that the future of live performance will involve hybrids, will involve people being with us in person and being with us globally. That, if we put that as a positive provocation, if we look at that and what that means and hold that, I think that turns the issues into opportunities. And at no point does anyone not feel that being in person with a performer is absolutely a wonderful experience that we will always hold on to, and what we are about in our DNA. So the next question around, can theatre exist without an audience? I'm not sure it can, and it's a great provocation, and it's a great question, because liveness is about togetherness, it's about jeopardy, it's about the fact that on this Wednesday, Tuesday, forgive me, I'm starting my day, you're ending your day, whatever we've brought into our days is with us on these Zoom squares. And if we did it tomorrow, we wouldn't have the same dialogue. It would be slightly different. We might be bringing different aspects of our life into that. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's real-time interaction. I think in terms of using new technologies and looking at co-presence when we're not together in person is super important.
Brilliant. David, I don't know if you want to come in, because I know obviously this is something that's vitally important to you and your profession.
Yeah, I mean, as Sarah said, I don't think there is any replacement for live theatre, because firstly, from a performance point of view, there's always when you do live theatre, there's always magic. Things happen. And with live audience, the rapport or the feedback from the audience, be it little or those little chemistry that happen, it cannot be replaced by videoing. And then for the last, as I said, for the last 2 shows, we've been 2 or 3 shows, we've been videoing, and it's a totally different experience for the performers, because on the one hand, if you do a live theater, the whole show is in one go. And the performers will feel the flow of it, and you get into the storyline, and things happen, and the reaction from your peers are different. And when you're videoing, the director said cut and we repeat, and things, it's a totally different feeling. And for people who are used to live theater, it's kind of it's difficult to get used to. Hence, this time around, because of the COVID, and we're doing a lot of videoing, I can feel that from my colleague that they finally realize the difficulties of being an actor in front of the TV. Because for all the while we've been doing shows live, and it's totally different, and it's 2 different. I can actually say that it's 2 different. Culture, even for a TV or movie actor and a live theater people, it's different. And let's hope that in the future, for some ways, we might find ways of putting them together. Because even if I'm watching, let's say, I'm watching an opera or a musical movie, that's it's not the same as going into the theater. As Sarah said, we have to keep the theater alive. but how? That's the main question. Because of the COVID, nobody's coming out.
I guess there's the immediate thing that's happened in terms of COVID that's changed things.
Yeah, and very, very fast, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd like to move over to Helen, because I think there's also other things that are emerging here. So obviously, for a while now, people have actually been engaging with the arts, not simply through live performance. And if I think about, you were talking about the rise of gaming, for instance, and new art forms, these merging of art forms, that's obviously also having an impact in it. And it's slightly different audience engagement, I guess, all round to what's typical with live performance.
Yes, well, actually, good spot. There was a on that slide. For those who have, the sharp-eyed of you, you might be able to see a picture of Animal Crossing, the game, so the really successful game that peaked during COVID. Obviously, because the reason why I put it there was because it embodied kind of the merging of the visual art world and also gaming sector, because actually they allowed kind of the open source of the Getty Museum's open collection into the game, which means it allowed the users of the game to kind of very much curate or create their homes by selecting Monet's artwork on their t-shirt or something. So this really kind of carves out new audience members. So people who perhaps were not very much familiar with the art world / performing arts or visual arts, they have a different kind of they are able to access it in a different way. So this very much carves out new and larger audience members as well. But actually, I would just extending from what David and Sarah mentioned just now, I think they both brought out a very, very important theme, which is that live streamed performances are very much not only, they are very much not kind of documenting or documentations of live performances. They're very much like a very different thing, and it involves kind of a different set of curatorial approaches. It's completely different. So in the same way that stage performances, you need your backstage team, you need sound and lighting, you require that team and more if you're thinking about live stream performances. And this is very much what we found as well during our kind of research processes when we spoke to different kind of digital specialists, and that's where they come in. And just now David mentioned how are we going to find the talent to support this kind of emerging new genre, and which is why universities in Hong Kong, for example, I can only speak for Hong Kong, they are very much starting new programs, talking about the how to merge or how to kind of manipulate or handle the arts and technology practices together. So it's very much, I think, industry is responding very, very quickly to what's been required due to the situation.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. I have two questions I want to bring in as you're talking about audiences. So I want to ask you, how are audiences' expectations changing, and how is the consumption of art changing? And Sarah, earlier you mentioned about accessibility. So in our earlier webinar, we also looked at the question of accessibility. Do you think, what kind of trends are we seeing in terms of the use of digital technology, whether it's making performing arts more accessible, or is it making it less accessible?
It's really interesting because I did a presentation to some of our donors recently, and there's such a wonderful community for us to hear back on how how we're doing and to work in concert with them. Very invested audiences for us, but also people that have invest in us and come with us and take risk with us. And one of our donors said that she actually found connecting with us on Zoom and connecting with us remotely much more accessible than coming into the theatre. And this was not a younger demographic. This was a person that's been with us for a very long time, but she has access needs, and to get out of her house is quite a lot of work for her. And it was a moment where we just sat back and reflected and went, this isn't about emergent generations either. This is about giving people more choices about how they engage with us. And I think that was something wonderful to hear, because you take a step back and you go, how can we be accessible everywhere? How can we find those access points for our audiences who want to be with us, but potentially we can give them more ways of being with us. And also we can also think about when we are in real life together, how we can make that really special. So for me, it's brought the question out for us again, really importantly, to not make assumptions about our audiences. Do work in dialogue, do work with your research and ask those questions up front. And not every version is perfect. So it's about bringing the strengths of each interaction that you can have. Does that make any sense? So at the moment, sometimes we're looking for the perfect solution to a problem, but actually what we've got to accept is we have a toolkit of ways that we can create our work and access that. And now let's look at that, look at the strengths, so people can find us in the best possible way. So for me, it's about going, it's not good enough not to have live captioning. It's not good enough to not, these are not nice things to have anymore. We've got to look at them as essentials and how we place them in. And that goes alongside, I think, what Helen talks about, particularly with cultural policy and future funding and future, what are the new terms and conditions for us in live performance, and what have we learned, and how do we influence at a policy level? So there's a feedback loop with funders around what's important for us. And I think that's what's brilliant about arts and culture. We ask the questions, we are fierce in our questioning of ourselves, and we really want to, this is a moment for us to do that. And I think that's super important around access.
Thank you, Sarah. David, how about you in your arts community, in terms of your audience? Do you see that? I see that you're, like, for example, you're adapting your performances for different types of audience with maybe different language needs, or maybe for Cantonese speaking audience also. So in terms of accessibility, do you see that the online performances that you're putting out, will you be attracting new audiences, or are you thinking about these issues?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Sarah. I mean, thank you, Sarah. You've given me a lot of new ideas after listening to you. I think firstly, what Sarah talked about, the funding. How it. At first, I was thinking, like, how do you generate income for the performers? And the only way of putting your shows out is through online, like YouTube or Facebook. But the income that you can generate from there, unless you're Psy or you're one of those top performers, pop performers, then it's meager. And the main way, I think, here is to get funding from sponsors and donors. And as Sarah said, the live stream makes it easy for some of the other donors and to approach us. And how do we open a two-way traffic with them? And how do we make our shows beneficial to them? I mean, to the donors. I think that's one way of thinking, and how I would love to get into. And from the performance point of view, I think I have two questions actually. One is the number of shows that's online nowadays. How do you make your show stand out? That is the biggest problem, because like mine, it's a tiny little company, and I'm surviving basically on hand me outs. and how do you compete? You know, how do you record a show and compete with, let's say, the Royal Opera or the Royal Shakespeare's House? You know, it doesn't work that way, because, you know, ours is a budget that's tiny in comparison, and ours are talent that are local and you know, and few in numbers. That's the first question. And then number two, I forgot about number two. and then apart from that, how do you make it interesting? How do you attract more people? And a lot of our I mean, when we were doing shows during the COVID period, and, you know, when we come back together, I find that especially a lot of backstage people in Hong Kong, people who are involved in doing backstage work, they have no work. For performers like musicians or dancers, you know, they can actually go out and teach and find some students, and we can do for musicians at least, we can teach online through Zoom. But for the backstage people, a lot of them have gone into Food Panda or Deliveroo, those kind of things. And how do we get them back? I mean, you know, once they get, you know, how do we get the theater back? That's the question number two.
Okay, thank you. I wonder if Helen has anything to add, maybe, like, you know, talk about a little bit about, you know, the question of collaboration, you know, what types of collaboration or partnership that we might need in order to take us out of this situation that we are in now.
Yes. I don't know if, I don't know why my video has gone, but anyway, the host has stopped my video, but okay, it's fine. Okay. I am going to start my video. Okay, so actually just now, David, you had a question, didn't you? You were like, you said, how do you make it interesting? How to make a recorded performance stand out, right? To answer, like, I'm not even going to attempt to answer that question, but if I were, I would have to introduce you to the people that helped me with this report, because many of them are kind of digital specialists, but with focus on kind of how to, for example, help NGOs/museums, you know, create online exhibitions, or, you know, through creative curatorial approaches, bringing those creative ideas onto a digital platform. So I think it is, and you're asking exactly the right questions, because it is a different skill set. Like, I have to re-emphasize the fact that it's definitely something new. It's not something that, you know, we would have in us already, because it's definitely something new, and they are the kind of experts. They probably don't have, you know, the artistic expertise like you do, but so it's all about the collaboration. It's all about meeting the right people who gel well, who vibe well with you know, Bel Canto, and if they are able to align with your missions, they know exactly the key message that you would want to bring out, for example, through your local artists, and they would like find that like angle. Why I have like a firm belief that it could happen is because I actually recently watched a show in the cultural theatre recently, because obviously for Hong Kong we're thankful, we're fortunate enough that theatres have reopened, and there was a show at the cultural centre, and it was going to be kind of a storytelling, so like a piano and a piano player, and accompanying like a storytelling performance. But obviously, the pianist is a Taiwanese pianist, and he can't make it over to Hong Kong. So, and they try, and the arts group, so Zuni Icosahedron, they tried something very new, which is live streaming. So like live in Taiwan, live in Hong Kong, on the screen, like projected, and it was a phenomenal experience. And they emphasized that it was an experiment. So it could go wrong, it could get jammed in the middle, but it was a beautifully executed experiment. And it's all about, you know, getting the right people there, getting the right angles, you know, at what point does the camera face the piano? At one point, do we see the piano's keys? You know, like it all has to be very perfectly executed, and that's kind of the skill set I think we're looking for in the performing art, you know, coming future. But I will definitely send you the contacts, David. So
thank you. No, I actually heard of that show, and unfortunately I didn't make it to that show, but it was very well received, I heard, and
it was well executed.
Some of my friends who went, they told me about it, and yeah. And then, you know, another thing, I mean, how many artists, how many performers are willing to step out of their comfort zone and accept new ideas? That's you know, that's another thing, isn't it? I mean, from the musician circles, especially, you know, we have the so-called purists, you know, those who are like, I only do classical music. Sorry, thank you very much. You know, pop, nah, you know. So how many of us are willing to step out and then go on a limb, actually? Yeah.
This, actually, your point, David, really picks up on something I wanted to ask as my next question. So thank you for the amazing link. Something which I spotted when I read the report was around the way that technology is actually changing art forms. And it's been an ongoing thing. This is now the third academy I've worked in. And collaboration has been something that academies struggle with. They really struggle because, as David was pointing out, we know how to train a classical musician, or we know how to train somebody to be working in the theatre, but how do you train somebody to cross those divides? And this becomes even more challenging now because potentially we're having entirely new forms of art developing. And where do we think this is going? Actually, I mean, I guess there's a premise here that the art forms are changing, that there is more collaboration. And if that is the case, then where might this be going over the next 5 or 10 years? I don't know, Helen, if that might be something you pick up with first of all.
Sure. Actually, on that point, I would love to, you know, I'm definitely going to try and attempt and answer that. But I think I would also be interested to know, Sarah, like kind of the background of your digital team at Royal Shakespeare Company, because obviously, actually, our report, we covered the Royal Shakespeare Company's immersive performances of the future project. That was an amazing project proposal. So, but anyway, okay, going back, I'm sure Sarah will kind of cover that in due course. But just now, Rob, you mentioned where exactly are the talents from? How do you train kind of people who cross? It is very difficult. Like, and I'm pretty certain like that we don't have an institution in Hong Kong that has achieved what you said, but I do see kind of courses coming up. So there are programs in Hang Seng U, there are programs in the Hong Kong UST trying to, you know, obviously the UST, they're very famous for their tech, you know, AI kind of courses, and they've recently, or they're in discussion with Beijing's like Academy of Fine Arts to kind of merge to do a joint program. So it's very much happening. So there are programs kind of emerging in Hong Kong, trying to build a capacity or trying to, like, you know, train up new talents to support this arts tech ecosystem. But you're very right there. Like, currently the pool is not huge, it's not large, but I do think, and going back to David's question just now, like how many artists are willing or open-minded enough, if I may, to kind of try to experiment with technology. Again, it's something that we handle with care on our report, because obviously we completely appreciate that. I'm a musicologist by training, so I play the cello, so I know like what classical musicians what they think. But at the same time, I guess I would just advocate that technology adds kind of an option to kind of new possibilities. We're not saying everyone must, you know, hop onto the bandwagon. We're not saying that. We're just saying, you know, if one was to kind of carve out more opportunities or wanting to try new things, it's there as an option, and it's very much obviously a trend that people should at least be aware of. We're not saying, you know, not forcing everyone to kind of adapt to it, like not forcing everyone to kind of, you know, have to incorporate tech into their practice, obviously.
Sarah, do you want to come in and answer perhaps this question and build upon the points which Helen put?
Yeah, no, I mean, all my work at the RSC is a form of collaboration, and I think that's allowed us to embed new technologies in the company in what I would argue is an authentic and considered and challenged way. I think when you start with any form of technology partnership or collaboration, you need to know what question you want to explore. So you need to have an artistic drive and an artistic question in the first place, and then an invitation. And it's really important that that invitation to collaboration is genuine. It's really important that the spirit of that collaboration is intended to do something new and different, because you've got the purpose of collaboration is about finding new, different, unexpected ways of presenting work that you wouldn't have done on your own. And that's the fundamental principle, I think, of collaboration. And collaborations break down when they don't have that spirit behind them. And when we worked on the Tempest in 2016 and invited Intel to Stratford, you know, it was an engineer that came up with the idea of real-time motion captured performance. And it was us to tell him back that is puppetry. And that is the spark of a creative collaboration. And then we look at diversity around technology and not homogenizing technology. Then you do need a wide range of people to R&D that with you. You need a heterogeneous approach to research and development that is not saying this is how we use this technology in the arts, because that won't open things up. So as Helen's point is, collaboration is hard. Not everyone wants to, not everyone should. So it's knowing the purpose of when and how and why you're approaching that. And then for me, what's a really important part of collaboration is sharing all those learnings equitably in the sector, so that we then there's a feedback loop and people pick it up. That's really important.
David, I don't know if you want to come in on this in terms around a collaboration. I guess, you know, would you be benefiting now had your training had a greater emphasis on how to work with different people, or how to reimagine your art form?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open to new ideas, and I think as Sarah said, you know, the collaboration, they need to have a genuine. They need to be genuine from the start, and if not, then halfway down the road, you know, you'll get into a huge argument, and thank you very much. You know, we go our separate ways. I think the hard part is for us to for people from different denominations to understand what and accept what the others are doing, and are willing to listen, actually, rather than coming in with your, you know, with a huge ego and ideas and said, you know, this is what I've been doing, and either you take it my way or, you know, or the highway. But it comes down to human nature, I think, and I think the good thing about COVID, if there's a good thing, then it kind of forces everyone to open, you know, to look further and wider and try to accept new things.
Thanks, David. I want to bring in one question from the audience here, from Alvin Wong.
Hello. Everything is jammed.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, I just want to bring in this question.
No, suddenly my screen jammed. Yeah, my screen jammed. So yeah.
Okay. From Alvin Wong, I'm going to read the question now. How do smaller companies or local performing arts organizations compete in the crowded digital space and generate income from ticket sales or other income besides sponsorships or funding? How can technology help in this means, as you're talking about collaboration, you know, so it's, in arts, I guess it's originality is very important. And so when it comes to collaboration, you know, we also talk about we're in a very competitive space. Sometimes we might not want to collaborate with other people because we don't want to know about our new ideas, right? So how do we overcome these problems, you know, to kind of, you know, to be able to collaborate with others, and to also know that the digital space is very, very crowded, and to be able to compete in that space when we have only limited resources? It's a bit of a loaded question.
No. I mean, is that directed to? I don't think. I think firstly, it's not the time to be selfish. I mean, you know, it's if you have an idea, then I like this, and can get better. You know, if somebody can come up with a better idea, or we can develop and do it together. And in terms of collaboration, you don't only collaborate with your peers. You usually go out and for instance, like, you know, I'm a musician, then I go out and collaborate with people from the visual arts, or collaborate people from the audio side, and see what we can do together. And then in terms of generating income online, let's not think about it for the moment, because if you're a small company, it's going to take a long while. And I mean, I myself, I look at a lot, you know, I go and search for ideas on YouTube. I think nowadays YouTube is probably the best school in the world, isn't it? You know, anything that you want to learn, you go on YouTube. I learned how to bake on YouTube. So it takes time to get more audience for your kind of art, and it takes time to, you know, to grow. So in order to generate income, I think live shows are the way to go if you're a small audience. But unfortunately, in this time, you know, you cannot have a full capacity. So it's tough. It's really tough. Yeah.
Could I just jump in here really quickly, just to say, I know this question is more kind of, it would be better for a practitioner to kind of answer this question, but just jumping in, I guess there are maybe two, like I can think of two maybe solutions where technology can play a part. First is an advertising. So obviously technology, you know, in terms of digital platforms or like online kind of adverts, I don't know if that could be a way to make, you know, to widen the exposure of smaller companies to, you know, but obviously not everywhere, because, you know, just as David mentioned, there are so many of these ads around already, but it's obviously targeted, like kind of targeted demographics. But again, and how do you know your target audience groups? That would then fall back to what Sarah mentioned at the beginning, you know, audience surveys, audience R&Ds. We really need to know our audiences. And but then, you know, it is a vicious cycle, because having said that, then you would also need funding to kind of fund your audience R&D research, don't you? So yes, so not quite answering the question, but just kind of, yeah, I don't know if Sarah might have something to add.
Yeah, I can riff off that really well, Helen. It's beautifully placed, because it is again about collaboration. It's about a sharing resource. It's about the traditional hierarchies around small, medium and large scale organizations will now have unprecedented challenges that we haven't seen before. So a small scale organization can perhaps move more quickly, is more agile. You know, we have to work together, we have to share resource. And yeah, when we look at, and we have to share our research. There is nothing proprietorial about research right now, because we are all learning and we are all dealing with change. This is a massive change exercise which is occurring, and that brings opportunities as well as huge pain in that process too. And the more we share, the more we set those parameters up for generosity and a look at the arts as a whole, not as silos, is super important. And I think that the Audience of the Future collaboration, which Helen mentioned before, is a 14 partner collaboration of arts organisations, technology companies and research. I've never seen the research so listened to as right now. It is absolutely our North Star. But also within that, in the moment of how we've had to pivot a huge large scale project, we have been held, like when certain parts of the collaboration have been suffering, others have held them, and that is what has held the collaboration together. And I think if we can do that as a sector and recognise when we are strong and when we're struggling, I think that we will, again, I think great work will come. But also just a note is that we are now effectively globally programming. We are programming for ourselves regionally and locally, but we are now globally programming, and we have to think sophisticatedly about that. We have to create a model that doesn't eat itself up. We have to look at what work we want to present and how we put that out there. Ask those questions, and now we're looking at, again, we go back to what are the new terms and conditions, and that I think is a whole exercise for us to do, going back to the original question of what landscape are we all going into, is we are redefining terms and conditions right now.
I think there's so many things here to dig into more deeply. Unfortunately, we're running short of time. I want to ask one final question, if that's possible. And it's the same question we tend to ask at the end of each of these, which is, if you had one takeaway from this webinar that you could give somebody else as something to think about or something to action, what would that be? And that could be another performing artist, or that could be somebody working in the field of education, training the next generation of performing artists. What would be the one thing, perhaps, from our conversation? Sarah, you look like maybe.
Yeah, I'll be off in that sort of brave new world of big question. I was on a call last week, and I was reminded how important it is to buy art. And I think if there's one thing you can do right now is see a show, buy someone's work, contribute to this system that we hold dear. Actually, I think that's probably one of the most important things we can all do for each other. If there is a form of payment, or if there's a form of way of us supporting each other, it's to remember that actually a gift of that is hugely important to whoever receives it or whoever makes it.
Oh yeah, I know. Sarah actually stole my one as well, because I was actually going to say that, but actually no, because completely, I'm completely agreeing with. I cannot emphasize more what Sarah just said, because also there's not only the helping each other aspect, there's also kind of the mental health aspect, obviously, because COVID. I think there are so many kind of mental health kind of it could open up a lot of different issues throughout different demographics of people. And I just think arts consumption, appreciation, engagement in arts and cultural activities, it's so beneficial to health, and it's so conducive not only to the industry, the economy, but also to well-being. So it's definitely take away, go see a show.
Yeah, same here. Go see a show, and then particularly go see a show that you don't usually go to.
Yes.
For opera goers, then go see a play or go see a dance, and the other vice versa.
Great. I love it. I love it when we have practical outcomes on things we really like on this webinar. So that's fantastic. And it's something that everybody can do. So thank you very much for that. If you've been watching, then thank you very much. I hope that you've enjoyed the webinar. And there are things that you can take away and think about. I'd like to say a huge thank you to David, to Sarah, and to Helen, and also to the wider Eduit team who've worked on the technical aspects of this webinar. It concludes the live stream, but we're going to keep the chat open for about 30 minutes. And we have questions that we haven't managed to get round to so far. So there's an opportunity for us just to discuss those a little bit further. I think some of our speakers are going to stay online, and myself and Louise are going to be online as well.
Actually, can I just ask a question to Sarah? What do you think of the length of the streaming? Because I have this feeling that with the younger generation, the concentration time has shrunk down to less than 5 minutes. So what do you do with your, with the Shakespearean show, let's say, how do you stream Hamlet online and expect them to sit there for ages?
Well, that's a very good question, David. I personally, I agree, but it's also more complicated than that, because we're talking about video streaming, which is passive, and the piece that I'm working on at the moment is passive, immersive, and participatory. And actually, to ask people to do that for 3 hours is really long. So we're looking at, at the moment, putting out there a bit of R&D that's about 30 minutes and to see how people can participate. But you're absolutely right, duration of stream should not be assumed again that it's a like for like in terms of being in presence together in person, and then what we can expect people. However, we shouldn't fall back on lower attention spans. We should push that. So I would argue that we can play with the 5 minutes, but we shouldn't fall on that actually we should be making work that allows us to immerse for longer durations. And it's the challenge of how we make it for those audiences to keep them there with us. We need to make sure that this form has the tactility that we have in real life performance.
Thank you.
And okay, we're going to stay on for a little bit, but I just want to kind of end this formal part of the webinar. So the recording of this webinar is going to be available on our website. So we'll be sending an email to everyone. And I can also share the link on the chat right now too. And our next webinar is going to be on December 1st, 4:30 in the afternoon Hong Kong time and 8:30 a.m. GMT. We'll be talking with senior leaders of academies in Australia, the UK, and Hong Kong about how all the changes that we talked about here might affect learning and teaching in academies and conservatoires over the next 5 to 10 years. So we're ending the formal part of this webinar, and goodbye for now. If you would like to stay on, please do. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. So that's kind of a formal part. We have some questions. So if you're able to stay a little bit longer, that would be lovely. There are other questions in the chat, so we'll have a quick look through and see if we can answer some of them perhaps. And if you're an attendee, then again, feel free to chip in more questions if you'd like to. Let's have a look and see where we got to. Just having a look to see. I don't know if anybody saw anything in the chat as well as a speaker. If you saw something you'd like to pick up on, then
actually, I have a follow-up question about the question that David was asking earlier about live streaming. So I think also maybe it has to do with the platforms that we are live streaming our shows on too. Because when it comes to clicking on YouTube or on Facebook, we are really used to having that motion of scrolling and looking at what else is there. So are those good platforms for streaming? I remember it's kind of like when Steve Jobs was deciding where to sell the iPhones, he said, no, we're not going to sell it in the supermarket. It has to be at the Apple store, so that it's a different experience altogether. So would Sarah or David or Helen, would you think it's a bad idea to stream your show on that kind of channel? So do you need a new channels altogether?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you've got to be careful that how can I put it? You've got a pragmatic need right now to get the work out. So probably Vimeo, YouTube, Zoom, those channels are the most sort of easiest ways of doing it. But longer term, I think what artists would like is an agnostic space that isn't defined by a technology company, but is built of themselves. And I think we're without revealing too much, we are exploring that right now for us, and we'll prototype something next year, not as what I would call as an outcome of a project, so not as an RSC streaming channel, just to be super clear on that, but we'll prototype a way you could do that, and to think more immersively, so not just about video, but about like using game engines to be 3D and push through what I would call the video form of performance, and also look more immersively about how you can participate. Those are the next steps, but they're not going to come quick because they need resource and they need care and they need attention and they need research and they need to be put out there. But I think longer term, that's what we'll see. And I think we're falling in love with the internet again. I think we are. I think it's delightful. Yeah. It's a beautiful place to be. And in some ways it's a form of distraction amongst lots of things as well. And we're finding its delight as well as its challenges.
I was thinking during this that there's probably a business opportunity here for somebody to start a website that's the funnel for all of these small companies doing performances where and they could have the algorithm to work out, you as an individual, what sort of shows do you like to watch? They take a percentage. There's a model here for somebody to set something up. Actually,
I think we'll see quite a lot of those. Yeah, and that's good. If you see a lot, then that will converge.
Yeah, I think there's quite a market here.
I think that's a little bit like sound space, isn't it? I mean, the audio, the song side of it has already been done. I mean, a lot of people are putting their individual or their indie songs up to it's called Soundspace or something. There's a site for it.
SoundCloud, perhaps.
SoundCloud, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
There's the question which we had, which I think was directed at you, David, about have you found this artistically engaging over the COVID period? So when you've been doing your performances, actually, is there, the reason we do this is for that artistic engagement, or have you more been challenged by the context of performance?
It's more from the pragmatic side, actually, because the artistic side of it, it's as usual, I would say. Yeah, but to put the show, it's different putting a show on stage and putting a show and trying to think of how to record it. Because if I put a show on stage and then put a wide camera, just archiving everything and put it online, it's going to be boring. And then how do you keep the flow of it, and how do you it's a very, very challenging thing from my side, because I got no idea how to shoot a video. So I have to collaborate with different people and ask them how they would see it. And the very, very first one we did with the Happy Prince, the person who's in charge of the video was so adventurous that I chopped the music down to less than 5 minutes, so it's a 5-minute clip, and he did the 5-minute clip in one shot. And I thought, wow! And the poor person who had to hold the camera and walk for 5 minutes, and that's a one-shot 5-minute take. And that's, from his side, I thought that was like, wow, it's quite something. And we do it for all the clips.
Can I? Because I guess it might also be a question for Sarah, but it feels to me, David, you're not a filmmaker. You're a singer and a conductor, I guess, musical director. But when I asked that question, it's really interesting that you immediately went into the film shot and the editing of it, rather than the qualities of what you're producing as a musician. And I wonder if
I'm not worried about my music
being taken away from that core, their core art form by this. So it's just an interesting question, how much people now sort of dividing their minds a little bit.
Because I absolutely trust what I produce in my music. So, I thought that should be fine. So, but the video side, that's interesting to me, because it's all new. So
if you found the artists, are they still able to maintain their focus?
Yeah, I think, like David's saying, it's all of that's front of center of an artist's mind if they're not usually used to presenting their work in that way. So it's sort of, I think, again, it goes back to sort of collaboration and probably connecting people that have video and editing skills, so that you're not relearning your practice, but you can sort of step outside and go, no, this is what I want. How do I achieve what I want? But those, again, are going to be, take time to get those sorts of partnerships right, because, you don't just go, oh, you do editing and video, all right, that will fit with me. It's a much more sophisticated nuance around getting the right people to work with. But I think it's no bad thing for artists to explore these spaces. I was on this other Zoom, and I invited an artist, an actor, to perform some Shakespeare, and oh my God, he really stepped up to the challenge, where he was like, he sort of did it in a really fake way. He was like, I'm just gonna get myself ready and I'm just gonna use my iPad and all of this, and then suddenly he went into character, but we didn't know he was in character, and we were just like jolted, and he owned that Zoom square. in a way that if we were thinking traditionally about it as a formal reading, it wouldn't have had the same thing. And he performed. And I think, you know, for David and any other artist, it's like, don't use these technologies in the business as usual way. Subvert them, hack them, work differently with them. And again, that takes time. But he was delightful and wonderful, and made me really, because I wasn't too sure whether what we were going to get. And he owned it, and we were there. So we're learning all the time. We are learning all the time about this space.
Yeah, actually, could I just chip in? So actually, Rob mentioned the kind of visual / kind of acoustic, kind of the balance, or like what kind of audiences might be looking for now. Like, say it was a musical concert, for example, like it's supposed to be a music concert, but it's obviously been brought on Zoom. So how are the expectations of the audience changing? So this is an interesting question, because I just went to kind of a demo session for 5G development for like the Hong Kong Chinese Orchestra, and this conversation, like someone asked this question, because obviously okay, we were like we were like clapping our hands to kind of the very good visual effects, but then someone asked, you know, okay, well, this you are an orchestra, so how do you balance, you know, the visual clarity with kind of the sound effects as well? And actually, you know what, the music director for the orchestra said, he was very straightforward about it. He was like, yes, you've got to have, you know, the good expensive audio equipment. Like we're not expecting, like, you can't just listen to, you know, your Apple AirPods and listen to this amazing, you know, singer or David singing. Like, it wouldn't do you justice at all. And I think I didn't expect kind of the musical director on the day to really be so frank about it. So I wonder what any of you might think about this, because obviously, you know, like our laptops, it's limited kind of the quality, like yeah, so it was an interesting thought.
It's true. It's like the technology, particularly in sound, is really compromising. I think we've been really visually led, and a lot of
exactly.
not time into audio qualities, and I think it is a live issue. I know that our collaborations, when we talk to the Philharmonia about quality of sound, even on like YouTube and Twitch and things like that, the sound is not the quality that artists require, and we have cultural biases around visually led work, and we never give sound enough time. Yet sound is one of the most accessible technologies there is, you know, bearing in mind different audience needs, and forgive me on that, but in terms of cost and in terms of implementation, sound can be incredibly intimate on performance, incredibly evocative, and we do, like, you know, the Bose glasses that were out a couple of years ago, and some of the technologies we've seen have been really brilliant, but they need to land more. And so some of the best work I think that's come out, I think there's a piece called Dark Field, which is just for two players, and there's a beautiful app, I can't remember what it's called, but it's if you've got iPods and you share one each, and it's a family performance, so it's for a child and an adult, and then they explore the room together, and they sort of see these imaginary creatures, and it's all through sound. It's so it's spatial audio. And then another beautiful piece that I saw at the Don Mar, I can't remember what it was called, but it was spatial audio with Juliet Stevenson performing, and my God, she can perform, and it's chilling just through headphones. So I'm a big fan, but we need more. That was quite a long sort of Sarah's top 10 hits, like favourite audio pieces. Sorry about that.
We had a question. Myself and Louise talked about this because we were given this before the session, and we weren't quite sure what to make of it. So it might be something that rings a bell and you go, oh, I know exactly what's being talked about, but we weren't completely sure we understood it, which is, what's the critical debate that purely digital work can provoke? So I don't know what way the word critical is being used in that sentence. What's the critical debate that purely digital work can provoke? I don't know if that means something more to you guys than us. We weren't sure if that was just to do with this thing that there isn't a live audience, but we weren't sure if there was something more underneath that question. No? No? Okay. Okay, we weren't sure if there was something more, so if there's not, that's fine. Let's look at and see. Louise, is there anything you've spotted in the chat or something else anybody else has seen?
Oh, sorry, I think we've covered
a lot
questions.
Is there anything which anybody wants to finish off with before we all say goodbye? Have we covered all the territory? We've covered a lot of territory.
Mm-hmm. Can I just ask Sarah again? Sorry, Sarah. How do the performers, I mean the actors or the musicians in UK survive in this period?
It's really hard. It's really hard. We're doing as much as we can to give as much work to freelancers as possible. Yesterday I had an opportunity to do that, and we did a workshop session. It's really challenging. So as a organisation such as ours, we're working with as many freelancers as we absolutely can. We're also advocating to our government to make sure that any government support the sector gets is delivered to freelancers. They were hit first and they were hit hardest, and it's relentless for them. And you know, we're doing everything we possibly can. It's really difficult.
But is there a time span, like, you know, of how long will this last, or how long can they survive? Like, you know, for instance, like UK shutting down again. So how do I mean?
Yeah, we are.
No,
We know from the government we are allowed to work. So technically it's not the same lockdown as it was before. So we can go to work, and we will continue to go to work. And within that, we don't know, like none of us know when we will come out through this. So we continue to do our best to plan and scenario plan for how we do that safely. But we, as the RSC, have always put our people first, and we'll continue to do that always. We are a company established by actors, and they are at the heart of our company. But I think no one's expected this. No one's, you know, experienced a pandemic like this. So we do our best, and in the spirit of that, I think it's the best way forward.